Hey everyone, welcome to the RotoGrinders Morning Grind podcast. I'm your host, Stevietpfl. It's Monday. It's November 18th, and it's 2024. We have a 6-game NBA slate to talk about here on today's podcast, joined today by Kyle Murray, KMurrDFS in the DFS streets. KMurr, not Kyler Murray. What's happening, Kyle?
Yeah, not much. It's been a big weekend of sports, obviously with football weekends and now some basketball. So excited to talk about the Monday slate with you.
Yeah, I like this time of the year for basketball. We've been talking about it a lot. I love the NBA Cup, so I'm excited for that to be back on Tuesday. I feel like we've seen some really awesome basketball. We saw awesome basketball on Friday. So yeah, just outstanding, right? Like I love the NBA Cup. We're getting tighter rotations, and the basketball has been great. Monday, the 6-game slate, man, we have a ton of back-to-backs on this slate. It's wild. Just how many back-to-backs we have on this one. So hope everyone had a good NFL weekend, and let's get back into these NBA streets. Everyone knows that I take NBA off on the weekends, so I'm not gonna lie, Kyle, I always get really excited when I open up the slate on Sunday night and I see that it's like 6 to 8 games. I think that's like a perfect NBA slate to get back in the groove of things. So glad that it's only 6 games here. So we get started with Chicago at Detroit, 232.5 total here. Detroit, a 3-point favorite. Both teams on a back-to-back, so we'll see how that kind of plays out injury report-wise. We'll see. We'll go to Chicago here first. What are we looking at for the Bulls?
Yeah, obviously, this is a spot where with all the guys healthy, at least as of now, like you alluded to, there's a lot of teams who don't have to put their injury report out yet because they're on that back-to-back. So a lot of these spots where we can maybe get some news or maybe like vet rest stuff, we won't know until tomorrow. But assuming all these guys play, it's a spot that we've definitely touched on before where they kind of just eat at each other and their production. Kobe White's typically my favorite of the three right now, just because I feel like he's the guy with the biggest scoring upside. So when you then get some peripheral production as well, which he does have the ability to do, he's had some games 6+ assists here and there. So when he spikes all around, that's kind of the spot where you get the upside. Overall, Detroit last year was a really good matchup. This year they haven't really been as good of a matchup. Their defense has been better, but their defense probably looks a little bit better because they're making a very conscious effort to play slower. Obviously, new coaching staff, JB Bickerstaff came from Cleveland, played very slow, defensive-minded guy. So obviously, it's not a great spot matchup-wise either. So it's not really a spot I'm looking at all that frequently for the Bulls here. But if I were to pick out a couple names, it'd probably be Kobe White and Josh Giddey in the mid-range here.
Yeah, top 10 in defensive rating, bottom 10 in pace, like you were kind of talking about. Typically, the types of matchups that we stay away from. If everybody plays, I'm with you. I don't have a ton of interest. I don't think anybody rests here. Houston blew Chicago out where those guys didn't really. I don't think anybody played more than 25 minutes. I think Zach LaVine played 26 minutes. So I think everyone on a back-to-back will be good to go for Chicago. And like you said, they have been playing way better defensively. I like the Kobe White call just because I feel like he's always the guy that's kind of overlooked. And we've seen him many times hit like 5 to 8 threes. And, those are the types of ceiling games that you're looking for from Kobe White. I think he's more of a run back option for me because I do like the Detroit side of this game. So let's go over to the Pistons here. They're bottom 10 in pace, and Chicago is still playing at the fastest pace in the NBA by, a really solid margin. They are making it a point to play extremely fast this year. Huge upgrade, I feel like, for Cade Cunningham in this pace up spot. He's going to get more touches. At the end of the day, a guy that has the usage and the touches that he's getting this year, if you're going to give Cade Cunningham more touches, like now we're talking like 30-10-10, not like 20-10-10. So a lot of interest in Cade here at 9,300. What else is kind of standing out to you here for the Pistons?
Yeah, you alluded to the pace here. Chicago playing at the third fastest pace so far this season. So been a really good matchup. Even though you look at their defensive efficiency numbers, they're middle of the pack or so. I guess they're just outside the top 5, tied with a bunch of teams in terms of 5 through 10 or so. So it's been a really good matchup here for the Bulls, and obviously a lot of that is due to the pace. Cade, I obviously love that call. I came last time I was on the morning grind. I talked about a lot of his rates in terms of not only usage but all around, assist rate and even his rebounding rate. And obviously, he went on that spurt with 3 games straight triple doubles. He had a triple double in his last game against Washington, which was today. So obviously, we know that he can produce outside of just in the scoring category, which we know that he can definitely do as well. So no problem with Cade there at 9,300. It did sound like Tim Hardaway Jr. had a chance to return to the game today. So for tomorrow, he might be there on that Monday game. So that's one thing to note. That'll obviously change the rotation a little bit. But in terms of the rest of these guys that I have interest in, other than Cade, Beasley, I mean, he's been it just feels like it can't continue because he's been, shooting so well. But the usage has been really good with no Tim Hardaway. The minutes have been really solid as well. So if he's going to continue to play 29, 30 minutes, the price is up, but I don't think it's too far up to where it's, there's not any juice left to squeeze here. So 5,100 for Beasley, I think is fine. So him outside of Cade. And if you're not playing Cade, I do think you can always have interest in Jaden Ivey. I think, if you think Cade's going to have a bad game, maybe you're game theorying that out. Ivy is typically a guy that would benefit from that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Cade coming off of a fast-paced game against Washington on Sunday with the triple-double, like you mentioned. I like Malik Beasley more if Hardaway sits, but I still think like if his ownership takes a huge dip, if Hardaway gets announced and like Beasley doesn't start, like Beasley was still playing like 25 plus minutes off the bench, and he'd have a lot of usage, if Hardaway gets to start and Beasley comes off the bench. So I don't mind that. Like you said, if you're not playing Cade, I think you could take shots on Ivy. I think you could play them together in this type of game. We saw in Washington, we saw Jaden Ivey score 47 fantasy points. Cade had the triple double for 65. Like in this type of pace environment, I feel like you could potentially play both of them together. Where, I mean, if you're getting 2 bottom 10 pace teams, their ceiling's probably kind of capped and the correlation probably not as good. But yeah, I mean, I have no issues. I think I'm out on Jalen Duren right now. Like his minutes are just kind of all over the place. He's been getting in some foul trouble, and they have no issues running Stewart out for extended minutes. So until this situation like becomes a little bit more clear, I don't think I want to touch it. We're gonna have plenty of centers to play today on the slate.
Yeah, there was like a little bit of a rumor, I guess, of maybe just a misreport of Stewart starting today for Duren, and obviously Duren did pick up a few fouls fairly early, and he ended up playing pretty well in the second half of the game. But obviously when you look at the box score, Stewart played 25 minutes compared to Duren's 18. So yeah, like you said, there's a lot of confusion there with the minutes there.
Yeah, not a situation I want to touch on a 6-game slate. All right, we got the Pacers and the Raptors, 236.5 total in this game. Indiana, a 3.5 point favorite. On the Toronto side, Barnes, Brown, Fernando, Olynyk, and quickly out. It'd be a back-to-back here for the Pacers. The only thing that I saw is Ben Shepherd got hurt. It was like an oblique strain. Those you don't bounce back the next day, so I assume that he'll be out for this game. But everything else, I didn't see any other injury report come out of the Pacers, so I assume that everybody else will be good to go here for Indiana. Let's start with Indiana. Coming off of a big win against the Heat on Sunday, what do you like here for the Pacers?
Yeah, you mentioned the Shepherd injury there, and obviously with Andrew Nebhard out, McConnell was already getting pretty solid minutes, so I do think Shepherd being out only helps that for TJ McConnell, who's obviously notorious for being one of the better per minute producers in terms of guys who come off the bench and play fairly limited minutes. He's been playing about 15 to 17 minutes with just Nemhard out, and then obviously in this past game with Shepherd only playing, let's see, Shepherd still played 26 minutes, but if he's going to miss, obviously that opens up even more potential run there for McConnell. So he's the first guy that I look at, especially if Shepherd's out, and I agree with you. I'd be pretty surprised if he bounced back and plays here. And, there might not be a direct player comparison with Aaron Nesmith there, but Aaron Nesmith being out is going to force guys like Ben Mathurin to play more of the 3 and open up more of the ball handling role or even the 2-guard role for McConnell, who could potentially play alongside Halliburton. So McConnell would pretty easily be my favorite play here from the Pacers. And at 4,100, obviously, I think he could easily smash there even in just 20 minutes. So I like him quite a bit. Similar to the Bulls, a lot of these top-end guys, Halliburton, Siakam, even Miles Turner to an extent, when they're all healthy, they do kind of nudge up against each other in terms of their production and usage. So not a ton of interest there. So basically, my exposure would probably, as of now, just rely on TJ McConnell and then maybe a little bit of Ben Mathurin there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, and I think you nailed Ben Shepherd perfectly. If he sits here, TJ McConnell, 25 plus minutes at 4,100, probably one of the top value plays in the entire slate, especially when you're thinking of matchup. I mean, this game has a high total for a reason. This is a really good spot. We've been targeting Toronto a lot this season. I mean, their defense has just been atrociously bad. I think they're 28th in defensive rating. Like Washington's worse. But yeah, I mean, Toronto is really bad defensively this year. So with Indiana being on a back-to-back too, I mean, potentially games staying close, being in Toronto. So, I mean, I think this is a ceiling spot for one or two of these guys. It's just figuring out, if you're playing MME, like you're getting exposure to all these guys. You're getting exposure to Halliburton, Siakam. I think my favorites are probably Mathurin and Turner, just because they're the cheaper. And I mean, we just saw a huge game for Miles Turner. We know he's capable of those types of game. Mathurin's been playing awesome. He was probably my favorite play here from the Pacers. But I mean, TJ McConnell, just going to be an awesome value play.
Yep.
So that's one that we're definitely going to play here. Toronto side, still dealing with a ton of injuries here for Toronto. Jakob Poeltl's had some big games here recently. Back-to-back over 50 fantasy point games, back-to-back games with a 25-10 at least line. Like, this is a guy where, I mean, he's producing with the minutes right now. Do we ride the hot hand? What do you like here for Toronto?
Yeah, so I guess one thing about the Pacers matchup, when you look at them, they are 8th in terms of, they're 8th worst in terms of defensive efficiency, and I think they're 11th or 12th in terms of pace. But this is a team that started really slow. They were playing slow, and their defensive efficiency was pretty solid to start the year. So they're actually trending in a pretty, I guess more so to last year, where they weren't really that good of a defensive team. Usually a pretty good matchup there, like you alluded to, high total in this game. RJ Barrett, like you mentioned, he's been awesome. The usage has been great, obviously with quickly out. But the price is definitely kind of caught up here, 8,600. So it is fairly difficult, but also if it's a spot where you're rostering Ben Mathurin and TJ McConnell and maybe even one of the other guys, you could easily make a case for saying, okay, this game is going to be the game you want to target here. But I also think you can make a case for potentially trying to buy low on a bounce back spot for Grady Dick, who's been playing a ton of minutes, 35 plus minutes in 3 straight games, 34 plus minutes in 4 of his last 5. So the minutes have not been an issue for him. And obviously we've seen the upside, right? He has a couple of games over 30 plus points already, handful of games, 20 plus points. So he definitely has the upside. Hasn't really produced in the peripheral categories yet, but we know he's capable of going out there and scoring 25 plus points. So he's a guy that you could easily bet on a bounce back here. The price is still fairly high, but I'm assuming he's going to be fairly contrarian considering, Ben Mathurin's at the same price in the same game. So I think Dick could be a potentially interesting tournament play. But other than that, it's probably just RJ Barrett, Grady Dick, and Jakob Poeltl for me.
Yeah, I mean, even though that game went in overtime against Boston tonight, RJ Barrett had 23 shots in regulation. So, I mean, he's very capable of these big games. I mean, his usage is great. His usage is exactly what we kind of target. And I don't think it's going to change with Scotty Barnes and these guys out. I mean, 34% last time out against Boston, 26, 25, 28, 27, 34, 33, 34. I mean, you look at these games, it's just Toronto's defense is bad. I mean, they've won one of their last 10 games. I mean, this is a team that not only struggling with offense, but with injuries, they're struggling defensively. So I think this game has the potential to stay close. Barrett, Poeltl, I don't mind the Grady Dick call. Abaji is always someone I don't hate taking shots on, but his price is kind of caught up to the point where I'm kind of on the fence with him. And then the bench guys, I don't know if I want to play any of the bench guys. I think this is just one of those spots where maybe I'll do a little 2 or 3, 4-man game stack and play one of the 2 big guys from Toronto that have the usage and production. Miami or Philadelphia at Miami, 214.5 total. Miami, a 3.5 point favorite. They're on a back-to-back. Embiid's questionable. Maxey remains out. And then I saw a report that Jimmy Butler is questionable, so they haven't necessarily ruled him out already for this game. So he'll have a questionable tag for this one. We'll see if he gives it a go. But let's start here at Philly. I mean, Embiid matters a ton, obviously. He played 33 minutes against my Magic the other night, and just we're not getting Joel Embiid yet. So 10K is a lot, I feel like, for him. Paul George, with Embiid back on the floor against Orlando, his usage took a huge dip. And I mean, McCain just keeps kind of doing his thing. I still feel like he's underpriced, even if Embiid plays in this game. Like, he's my favorite play and maybe my only play that I like here on the Philly side.
Yeah, totally agree with you there. Obviously, if Embiid's out, changes some things there. But yeah, McCain, I do think there's potentially a little bit of he's the hot hand right now. Embiid's not fully healthy. Paul George still returning from the injury, so maybe he's getting a few extra looks from that perspective. Maybe that's not something that will continue. But I mean, he's shot 10 plus threes in 3 straight games, and that was even with the last game having Embiid and Paul George back on the floor. And like you mentioned, with Embiid playing 33 minutes, you alluded to it. He's not obviously his full self right now. He's definitely taking things easy. And I do think that 33 minutes is probably a ceiling outcome for him in terms of his minutes there. Obviously, that game was pretty close all game, so he was able to max out his minutes there. But I agree, McCain at the current rate, he's still too cheap at this price, sub 6K. He's just shooting the ball a ton. And yes, he has shot incredibly well from behind the arc, but I mean, that was his whole profile coming into the draft, and obviously he looks like one of the biggest steals in the draft right now. So yeah, I think he's fine at this price. 6,200 was his price last game. He actually came down in price to 5,800, so that doesn't really add up a whole lot there. I still think you made a case for Paul George, though. He played 36 minutes in the last game, so he's clearly trending better in terms of his ceiling, in terms of his minutes than Embiid is, and he did have a 27% usage rate last game, even with Embiid there and Jared McCain having a fairly sizable usage rate as well. So while Paul George, his usage rate isn't the same as it would be without Embiid off the floor, he's still, I think, a capable scorer, and he obviously can fill up the stat sheet top to bottom. So Embiid, probably not on the list for me. So it's probably just going to be Paul George and Jared McCain for me.
Yeah, and like if Embiid gets ruled out, Drummond's 5,600. Obviously, we'd have interest in Drummond here, especially with like a Bayou on the other side of this game. So like they'll need Drummond's size. If Embiid gets ruled out too, I'll probably take some shots on Yabusele at 4,600 because I love I love hustle players. I mean, they're just like those are the types of guys that fill up the stocks, and I mean, we get so much upside when you can fill up the stocks. The Miami side, Butler matters, but now like we got Hero at 8K. This isn't like a huge uptick in pace type spot. It's not a huge defensive spot. Bam at 85. Like, I kind of hate this game, and I know hate's a strong word. I dislike this game as a whole. I obviously have a little bit of interest in McCain on the other side, but like now that like Kevin Love is like getting in the mix and taking shots, and like I don't know what to do with this Miami team, especially if Jimmy Butler comes back.
Yeah, definitely. They are playing their studs a good amount of minutes right now. Bam played 40 minutes in today's game, so that's always good in terms of what they're capable of ceiling wise in terms of playing time. But if Butler comes back, that could potentially change, right? You kind of feel the need to take some of the load off for some of these guys with Butler back. So if Butler does play, I probably don't have a ton of interest in a lot of these guys because obviously their prices are now up a bit more. There are a couple value guys that I think make some sense if Butler's out again, with Duncan Robinson and Josh Richardson both playing 24 plus minutes last game. Richardson hasn't really been great, but in years past, he's been an okay permanent producer, and obviously we know Duncan Robinson can get hot from beyond the arc, so he's another guy that you could potentially make a case for playing there. And I believe Jaquez is also banged up as well, so if he ends up missing, that obviously opens up even more minutes for those guys in the wings. So my two favorites there would be Robinson and Richardson, most likely.
All right, we're moving on. We got Washington at New York facing the Knicks. 231 total. Knicks a 13-point favorite. Both teams on a back-to-back. I didn't see anything as far as like coming out of the game. Miles McBride missed Sunday's game with an illness, so we'll be paying attention to if he's good to go or not, if he's back, because obviously if he's out, how the Knicks run their rotations, I'd have a lot of interest here. So let's start Washington going into New York. What do we like here for the Wizards?
Yeah, I mean Jordan Poole's price at 7,100 is still fine. Like he hasn't really shown the upside as much with Kyle Kuzma alongside him, but his assist rate's been pretty good. He's averaging 5 rebounds or so over the last 4 games. So he does have some peripheral upside there. So that's a spot that you could potentially look at there. But again, 7,100, I don't think it's like a great price tag for him. Kuzma's not really playing a ton of minutes right now, so it's hard to justify, playing him there. I think he just lacks the upside, and obviously not a great spot from a game environment perspective here against the Knicks. So I like to slow it down. There's a pretty high total in this game, 231. So maybe the books are just expecting the Knicks to lay it on him here, because I don't really expect there to be a ton of excitement from a matchup perspective here for the Wizards. So it's probably mostly a stay away here.
I will point out this, right? Kuzma has been kind of in and out of the lineup dealing with an injury. Maybe he sits on the back-to-back. So that would obviously change things. So watch for that news. Because, yeah, I mean, that would make the situation a lot more appealing. And, I mean, Kuzma is coming off 29 minutes. They're just continuing to spread out the minutes. They're playing very deep bench. We talk about it a lot with Golden State. They're just playing so deep bench-wise. I mean, even if you look at the Detroit game, yeah, the game wasn't necessarily close, but no one played 30 minutes in that game for the Washington side. So, yeah, I think Kuzma is your ceiling guy, I guess. But he's not my favorite play. Like if he gets ruled out, I would obviously have some interest here. Injury report could definitely dictate some interest. Like, does Valanciunas sit on a back-to-back year? He played back-to-back like 18 and 17 minutes earlier this season, so that could open up some minutes potentially for a guy like Keyshawn George, especially if Kuzma sits. So just watch the injury report on this one. Like, it'd be really interesting when that 1:30 report comes out tomorrow on the Washington side. Like, I haven't necessarily, I mean, maybe Embiid, but like that's on the back-to-back situation. There hasn't been like any like crazy injury stuff so far on the back-to-backs. So watch that one. On the Knicks side, I mean, gosh, man, we just witnessed like the Knicks just say, hey, you 5 guys are just going to go out and play as many minutes as you possibly can with McBride out. Josh Hart played 46, Bridges played 45, OG played 40. Like, it's just the philosophy of the Knicks coaching staff is we're just going to play our guys. They're going to be the guys we play. We want them on the court as much as possible. And I mean, how do you not like the Knicks in this matchup against Washington with both teams on a back-to-back? Going to get some ugly basketball here, but yeah, I mean, OG 64, Bridges is 66, Hart 74. Obviously you got Brunson and Towns, but I would definitely pay up for Towns over Brunson personally. And I like Hart and OG a lot, especially if McBride sits again.
Yeah, agreed. If McBride's out again, obviously, like you mentioned, the minutes is crazy. Like in terms of the projections that we had for today, like we projected a couple more guys to just have bigger roles off the bench, which obviously did not come to fruition. I think a lot of that was due to the game being really close, and then obviously, all these guys playing 45 plus minutes. It's hard to project that for like a regular season game. You can almost guarantee that would not be the case if McBride's out again. And then you do have to factor in 13.5-point spread here. Obviously if the game blows out, they're definitely not going to be playing, 40 plus minutes. So that's like I guess the one thing to consider there. That might be a little bit different from last game. And if that were to change and McBride is out, Dottie has been a guy that's been playing, having a role at times on this team. Is a guy who can play a few different positions. So he would be like a large field dart throw type play. Maybe try to bet on the game blowing out here. So he'd be a guy that I would have some interest in. But otherwise, all these top end guys are great plays, right? I do think though, if you play more than one Nick, or maybe even just one of the expensive ones, it would make sense to have some Washington pieces, because I do think those, really high upside games with a lot of minutes come in a close game.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. All right, Houston at Milwaukee, 217.5 total here. Milwaukee's a 3-point favorite. The Houston side's on a back-to-back. Middleton's out for Milwaukee. I mean, I don't really expect much here as far as Houston injury report with the back-to-back, especially with the game that they had on Sunday. What do you like here for the Rockets?
Yeah, in terms of matchup, Milwaukee last year was a team that was playing really fast, and even the year before that. And that's typically something to be expected with Giannis being the primary focus of your team. But they really haven't been all that fast this year. Their defense hasn't been great. They're still bottom 10 or so, but they haven't been playing as quick. So it's not as of an exciting matchup as it was last year when they took a really significant step backwards. But this is a game of a 3-point spread. So if it's one that's close and competitive, we could see a lot of these guys play big minutes. Fred VanVleet is 6,800. He's coming off of a pretty solid game, 18 points, 10 assists, 7 rebounds there against the Clippers. We all know that VanVleet is a guy who can play 40 minutes in a game that's close. So that, strikes me as a potential spot for one of those kinds of games here for VanVleet. So he's a guy that I have some interest in. Amin Thompson's also been playing some pretty solid minutes as of late. So, he's a guy who can definitely produce in all categories, especially steals, blocks, rebounds, and then he can definitely get in the points category as well. So he's another guy that I do have some interest in. Jabari Smith, I get it. His price has absolutely plummeted. He is coming off of a game that was pretty solid the other night against the Clippers. Let me see. Today he only played 24 minutes, but he had 10 points, 8 rebounds. That price is so cheap for Jabari Smith that I do think he's fairly appealing here, especially in a game that's pretty close or expect to be pretty close. I would expect Steven Adams to play, and this one they've been pretty consistent with their pattern of whether he plays or sits. But whether or not Jabari Smith plays the 32 plus minutes, I think all comes down to staying out of foul trouble and it being a close game. I think that's fairly likely here for Smith, so I do like him once again.
Yeah, I don't hate the Smith call. Thompson's someone that I like land in his price range sometimes and just play every once in a while. I have no issues doing that. Like he just opens up with being a guard or a forward when you kind of end up in that price range. And I mean, he's a guy, when he gets the minutes, he can produce as well. So I have no issues with Thompson. Green, I listen, Sengun could crush in this matchup. I don't want to overlook that. Like I think that he has one of the better ceilings on the slate. I like the price on VanVleet and Green. I mean, we'll see what we're looking at by the end of the day, value-wise, with the injury reports, with all the back-to-backs. But, I mean, right now, it looks like a balanced build might be really solid. So, kind of when I'm leaning, maybe 1 value, 2 value plays with like 1 or 2 studs and then building out a balanced lineup. And I feel like these guys in that 6K range can make a lot of difference. Other side of this game, obviously you got Giannis at the top. We finally saw a ceiling game out of him the other night against Detroit. It's about time. What do you like here for the Bucks?
Yeah, that game, I can't remember a performance that extreme for a while. I think back to like the days of AD on the Pelicans, where he had a couple of big games. And even when DeMarcus Cousins was back in his heyday, he had some big games, but 97.5 DraftKings points. I can't remember someone beating that. What was it, a 59-point triple-double or almost a triple-double? He had 7 assists, 14 boards. So the price is obviously up after that performance. It's a hefty price to pay, but we are going to have some value, I would assume. But with Lillard returning, the price probably isn't going to be all that appealing unless you're like seeking to be contrarian there. But outside of that, a lot of these guys, especially the wings, the value wings, are kind of priced up, with Dame returning. So probably not going to get to a ton of those guys. So it all just depends on if I want to target Giannis at that price tag, even with Dame returning, to be contrarian, and maybe even Dame. Obviously, it was a concussion, so I assume he'll step back in and be full minutes, 35, 36 minutes plus for Dame. So I think both of those guys could be contrarian spend ups here.
Contrarian spend ups when you're talking about Dame and Giannis, right?
Yeah.
It's just it's so interesting. They take so much of the production of the team just in general. that it's hard for me to play anybody else.
Yeah.
And Derek and chat, Harden has had a few like that, right? Yeah, I mean Westbrook's had a few. I mean Westbrook back in the day, Westbrook.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, we've seen big games like this, and I mean, it was the same night that wasn't it the same night that Wemby went for like 70 fantasy points. So
Yeah.
like,
I'm pretty sure Cat had a monster game too.
yeah, it was a wild night.
Yeah.
And you're gonna get that. I mean, so yeah, it's one of those two. If I'm playing Milwaukee players here, honestly don't hate the idea of maybe getting a little Brook Lopez just because he's a guy where if he gets hot, he'll keep shooting and he won't be afraid to shoot when he's open type of thing. So I don't hate Brook Lopez here. Finish it out. My Magic going into Phoenix. 207 total in this game. Phoenix, a 1.5 point favorite. Paulo out. Wendell Carter Jr. doubtful. Kevin Durant out. We know that he's going to be out, and we know that Bradley Beal's already been ruled out for this game. They told us on Sunday that Bradley Beal won't play. We'll see if anything else comes out. We saw Devin Booker kind of get going. He had 44 actual points on Sunday. But let's start here with my Magic. What do you like here for Orlando?
Yeah, obviously Franz Wagner has been balling with Paolo out, but the price is also up now. Obviously, I know you like Franz being a Magic, but also former Michigan Wolverine, so I'm a big fan of Franz as well. Averaging over 30 points per game over his last 3 games. The thing is, like, they don't even really have to be all that of exciting games, which obviously Orlando sort of thrives on. Like, they like to keep the totals down, keep the pace slow, which is probably a key indicator at this 208 total. But even despite both games, both teams scoring fewer than 100 points in the last 2 games, he's averaging 30 points. So it doesn't take a lot of exciting game environments for him to produce here. I do think he'll be pretty contrarian considering the projected game environment and the increased price tag. I don't think he's going to project as well as some of these other guys. We've talked about Cade in this price range, Dame's in this price range, all the Knicks. So there's some guys I think will project better. But Franz will definitely be a contrarian option. 1 point spread here, so you should be fine in terms of blowouts. And there are a couple games that could potentially blow out on this slate, so there's an advantage there if there's 3 or 4 games that blow out on a smaller slate. If you just find the one game that doesn't, that's a pretty good angle to shoot sometimes in NBA DFS. But in terms of some of these other guys, I don't really have a ton of interest there. Obviously, Anthony Black, his minutes have been pretty consistent. Last game, he wasn't really producing all that well on a permanent basis, but before that, he was fine. Priced down at 3,900. So if you needed a super cheap option there, and maybe TJ McConnell doesn't work out, maybe Shepard plays for some reason, you can find Black as a potential pivot there. But other than that, I think it's mainly just Franz for me.
Yeah, I mean Franz, he's been playing incredible basketball. As someone that watches a lot of Orlando basketball, I mean, I'll say this: I talked about Jonathan Isaac on Friday against Philadelphia, and I ran really good with that. By the way, he had like 8 fantasy points in the last like 3 minutes of the game. But he had a really bad first like 4 or 5 minutes, and then played really well. He's a guy that can fill up your stocks. And the fact that they're starting to run him out more minutes, they're kind of taking minutes away from Da Silva and Black to get Isaac out there. They love Jonathan Isaac's defense. So if you think this game is going to stay close, I don't think he's a crazy tournament play at 4,200, but know the range of outcomes. The range of outcomes is 14 minutes to 22 minutes typically. So in 22 minutes, he can put up 30 fantasy points. We know that. Like, he's a guy that can get 4 or 5, 6 stocks. I mean, he's a fantastic defender. So the fact that they're starting to roll him out more minutes in meaningful games, they love this guy. Orlando loves this guy. So I think Jonathan Isaac at 4,200, depending on the value that we get today, is playable. But I'm with you. I think Franz is like clear-cut top option here. Oh, that was a good touchdown to T. Higgins. Like, he was wide open. Sorry, distracted by football. But yeah, I mean, Goga, like they've been giving Mo Wagner enough minutes where like Goga has not been as efficient. So Mo Wagner and Isaac have provided a lot of spark off the bench the last couple games. So just something to note. Coming from a Magic fan, no bias. Phoenix side, I don't like taking players against the Magic. The Magic have been playing fantastic defense, even with Wendell Carter Jr. and Paulo out. I mean, they're second in defensive rating. This game's going to be pretty slow pace-wise. It's really hard to overlook Devin Booker, though, with Beal and Durant out. The usage is massive. We saw him take 29 shots against Minnesota on Sunday. Hate shooters on back-to-backs, but, I mean, if this is going to be a competitive basketball game, like, the production's going to come from this guy. Nurkic's situation drives me crazy. I like Tyus Jones and I like Devin Booker here from the Suns.
Yeah, of course, the one day where I'm not betting. Phoenix started a little earlier, and obviously with football going on Sundays, I didn't bet the early game. I've just been blowing money on Devin Booker the last few days on his assist prop and all that stuff, and his rebounds plus assists, and obviously in his points too. And of course, he gets there in a big way. The day I'm not betting him, you pointed it out. Obviously, not a great matchup. Orlando, one of the better defensive teams. They might even be the best defensive team in terms of defensive efficiency. They're second, and then they obviously play very slow. So, and that's obviously incorporated in the 208 total for this game. But again, Booker's a guy who's going to produce a lot of what the team's doing, and he can fill up the stats in all kinds of ways, right? I do think he's a guy who he has triple-double upside with no Kevin Durant. His assist rate and his rebound rate all go up with no KD. Obviously, we know he's going to have the scoring upside as well. So I do like Devin Booker. Again, assuming he's contrarian, I think him and Franz will be pretty similar, actually. And I don't even mind stacking those two up and hoping that maybe 2 or 3 of these other games blow out and this game remains competitive and close. And those guys both play 35 plus minutes and have big games. So I would probably stick to those guys in terms of the top end guys. I will say the one cheaper option in this game I have some interest in is Grayson Allen. He's been playing pretty consistent minutes. I believe he missed 2 games ago, but returned today's game, played 24 minutes, scored 18 points. So I don't mind him at 3,800. Again, there's going to be some better value options, especially if McConnell shakes out the way we're expecting to, but still like Grayson.
Yeah, and I mean, watch that news on him because it's a hamstring and it's a back-to-back. So
good call.
If he's out, he's on my RG season-long NBA team. The most competitive NBA season-long league around. It is wild how competitive that team is.
And I'm about to be 0-4.
Oh, I was 0-3, and I beat an undefeated 3-0 team. That's like how that league works, man. It's wild. The RG NBA like season-long league is, I think it's like year 8, 9, 10. It's crazy. And it's 16 teams, and it's wild. Kyle's in it, so he knows what's up. But you get these people that talk about like NBA season-long. Listen, the RG, it's not even it's a bunch of industry people now because, I mean, throughout the years, there's been so much that's changed. Like, not everyone's with RG anymore. So it's crazy. But anyway, all right, let's play the morning grind game, and then we'll get out of here, go watch the end of the NFL game. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us. If you haven't already, subscribe to the RotoGrinders Morning Grind on YouTube. All right, favorite play under 5K to go 7X. Who is your cheap ceiling play today?
Yeah, it might be a little bit of a boring play, but I've talked about him a couple times already, so I'm going to stick with it. TJ McConnell. And honestly, even if Shepard does play, I still like him to go over this number. Obviously, a really good matchup against Toronto, one of the better game environments from the Vegas totals on the slate. So give me McConnell.
Yeah, I'm going to actually go to somebody you were talking about because I think this game has a lot of potential to stay close. Give me Jabari Smith Jr. at 4,900. This question's designed for upside, right? It's a 7X play. If this game stays close, he's capable of big games. So, like his ceiling. Over 8K to go under 5X. Who's your bust today?
This pick does get a little bit easier if Butler plays, but I'll go with Tyler Hero. 8K. Obviously, if Butler plays, I think that's a pretty good, safe bet for him to be under 5X. It's a hefty price tag for him and a difficult matchup. The game doesn't look all that exciting. But even if Butler plays, I don't know if I'm, in love with Hero. But I do think Butler has a pretty good chance to play in this one. So I'll go with Tyler Hero.
I'm going to stay in that same game and go Paul George. I like a lot of plays on the slate, and I know Paul George is capable of big games. I think Embiid gives it a go, and I think that just kind of hurts Paul George overall. So Paul George is my Bust today. Favorite 6x play?
Yeah, so this is actually you already mentioned it, but I'll use him for a different category. Jabari Smith, like him quite a bit. Like the matchup. Again, I do think this game's going to be close and competitive, which I think that's kind of where he has the ability to play 34, 35 minutes. So I'll take Jabari Smith there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to keep playing OG. I know I talk about this guy all the time, but this is a fantastic matchup going up against Washington. They're bad defense. Good pace up spot for the Knicks. And I mean, they're just playing a gazillion minutes. He has at least 38 fantasy points in 5 of his last 6 games. Love what we're getting out of OG right now. Just he's balling. I mean, it's as simple as that. He's just balling right now. Who's your favorite GPP ceiling play on the slate? Price doesn't matter. Who do you think has the highest ceiling on the slate?
In terms of GPP, I'm gonna go with Devin Booker. I know the price is 9,500. He's just kind of lost in the shuffle of guys in the same price range. You have a handful of guys that we talked about being interesting. The more I think about it, I actually think Giannis might just still be pretty popular just because there's not a ton of spend up options. Even though the price is very high and with Dame returning, so he might not be as contrarian as I thought. So I'll go with Devin Booker.
Yeah, I like Booker a lot, even though I hate the matchup. But I'm going to go to Cade Cunningham. We're going with the pace up spot here against the Bulls. We talked about it. I know it was the first game that we talked about, but coming off a triple-double, he's capable of 70-plus fantasy points. I really like this spot. Anytime you get in Cade in these pace up spots, these are the types of matchups that I love to play him in. He's been incredible to start the season, and I think this is a really, really good spot for him. So give me Cade Cunningham is my favorite GPP ceiling play today. Let's get weird GPP play. Who's somebody you think is going to be low owned that you like for tournaments today?
Yeah, I guess I'm not fully sold if he's going to be low owned, but he's just typically on slates he's been low owned because he's so close in price to some of the studs on his team. Ben Mathurin, him being just behind guys like Siakam and Halliburton and even Miles Turner. I feel like people just naturally gravitate to him, to those over him. But Mathurin right now, he's been playing big minutes, 35 plus minutes in 4 of his last 5 games. And obviously, if Shepard's out, people might catch on and play him at a little bit higher of a clip there. But either way, I do think he's going to at least be low owned enough to where I think he's a strong tournament play.
I am going to go to Jared McCain. It's really hard for me to kind of judge his ownership, especially on a 6-game slate, but I really like this guy for tournaments today. I hope people get sticker shock with him, and I think personally he's just still too cheap. Shooting a ton, Embiid and Paul George being on the floor is not hurting him. I mean, it's the same thing that like Maxey. We these Philly guards, man, they just score. So I mean, this is a guy that he's not afraid to shoot, and he's been shooting really well. Can he keep shooting, 40+% from the field? We'll see. But I mean, everything I've seen from this guy right now is, he's obviously earning these minutes, and he's taking advantage of every minute. Like, what do they do when Maxey comes back? I was talking about this the other day with my friend, and like, what do they do? Like, do you move Oubre to the bench and keep playing McCain with Maxey? Because that would be my initial thought. That's what I said. And they're like, oh, no way. They're going to use McCain as a 6th man. I'm like, how do you use this guy as a 6th man now? Like, it's just, he's been playing incredible basketball. So anyway, all right. Betting portion of the show. Any bets that you like here night before?
Yeah, for the totals, I like the under. I know that we didn't talk them on this slate because they're in the night slate, so not on the DraftKings main slate. But I like the under 234.5 in the Atlanta and the Sacramento game. Atlanta's in the second half of a back-to-back. Obviously, they're a little bit banged up as well, but the Kings are really banged up. Obviously, I know De'Aaron Fox has scored 1,000 points over his last 2 games, it seems. He's been incredible, but no DeMar DeRozan, no Malik Monk. Sabonis is doubtful. Like I mentioned, Atlanta on the second half of a back-to-back. So I'll take the under in this game. I know it's typically going to look like it's an uncomfortable bet because it's 2 teams that play fast and they play bad defense. But in terms of what you look at in terms of their current rosters, there's not a lot of talent and a lot of injuries. So give me the under there.
Yeah, I mean, I like that one. Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to get a line for this game that I was just looking at. I was trying to get a current line. So I'm going to take the Pacers -4 in this game. I really like Indiana in this game. It was 3.5. Obviously, if you can get it at 3.5, get it at 3.5. I like 3.5 better than 4, but I still bet it just now at 4. Going into Toronto, I know the Pacers on a back-to-back. They're just playing really good basketball, and the Raptors are not. So coming off a huge win at home on Sunday against Miami, I think Indiana goes to Toronto, beats the Raptors. So yeah, that's where I'm at here. Not a ton of player props up. So is there any? I don't have any player props that there wasn't anything up that I liked because I mean there's so many back-to-backs on the slate. Did you see something you liked?
I had an idea of a player who I thought might pop, but like you said, no line for him. So I guess
Yeah.
my recommendation would be to check out my scores and odds plays in the morning. But I do think the guy I'm interested in right now is the points and assists line for Fred VanVleet. Pretty good matchup from a shooting perspective against the Bucks. Again, obviously we don't know what the line's going to be at, but I do think that's usually one that I think I'm going to like in the spot.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking for Cade's lines because, I mean, this is a fantastic spot. So I'm hoping we get something decent on Cunningham's lines. So, all right, that's going to wrap it up here for Sunday night, Monday podcast. Hope everyone has a fantastic Monday. We're back tomorrow talking NBA Cup. Good luck, everyone. We'll see you then.